Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video, I'm testing out the Pebble or Rubble technique. I did receive a few comments about this technique, so we're gonna give it a try, and if you guys have anything else you want me to try out, be sure to leave it in the comments below. I'm starting off by mixing in my resin, and in today's video, I'm using craft resin. It's a 1-to-1 ratio by volume, and I'll have a discount code in my description if you want to give them a try. After I add in equal parts of the A and B, I mix together for several minutes. I'm going to be working on an old tray, and once my resin is mixed in well, I separate it into a smaller cup so that I can add in my pigment. I'm going to be using a base layer of white and then working with alcohol inks later. So for my white pigment, I'm using just Resin's pigment paste in the shade Titanium White. I always mix pigment pastes in their container first before adding some into my cup of resin. I'm making sure to add a generous amount so that it's very opaque and you won't be able to see through it. I have liquid latex on the bottom side of my tray to protect those outer edges from any drops of resin that will flow over. I'm going to lightly sand my surface with some sandpaper just because this tray has been sitting around for a while now, and I want to ensure that this new layer of resin will bond with the old layer. I prop my tray up onto some cups and make sure that my surface is leveled, and this step is very important. So for some reason there's a few areas on my table that aren't very leveled. This could possibly be due to some resin drops that I wasn't able to clean off properly, or potentially from the cups that I'm using. I'm not entirely sure what's causing this at the moment, but I do my best to ensure that the tray is leveled. So I'm playing around with a wooden stick and placing it under one of the cups. Now my surface is leveled, and always be sure to check both ways with your level tool as well. Now I'm ready to start pouring on my white pigmented resin. I use a silicone makeup brush to make sure that it's reached the very edge. As always, I'll have all the products that you see in this video listed in my description, so if you want to give this tutorial a try, be sure to check that out. I'm going to be using alcohol inks from Let's Resin, and I'm starting off with a black alcohol ink. I make my way around the surface, trying to be mindful of the space that I'm leaving between each drop. Now I'm going to go in with Let's Resin's white alcohol ink, and it does say that it's a sinker, so it should be a little more heavy than their other alcohol inks. And I cut off the top weird, so it's kind of spraying around a little bit. I decided that I wanted to add in some color, so I took their alcohol ink in the shade Cerulean, which is a beautiful blue shade, and I added that into a few areas. Then I decided to play around a little bit more with colors, so I took the Forest Green alcohol ink and added that in as well. I ended up not really liking the mix of colors and would have preferred to stick with one color, and this layer did end up being a fail. For this technique, you don't want your resin to be too runny so that it all drips over the edge and ruins the design that you made. And you also want to be careful of the amount of resin that you're adding, because even if your resin is thick and you add too much resin onto your surface, of course it'll still drip over. When I came back the next day, as you might be able to tell in this clip, the resin was pouring off onto one side, so I decided to give it another try. This time I'm also going to be testing it out on this round wooden tray, and it has a slightly lifted edge, which will be a big help in avoiding any drippings. So I made this mistake the first time of not waiting long enough and also adding too much resin onto my surface. I mixed in my resin once more and again add in the same white pigment. So my second time around, I make sure to wait a little bit longer, and also I'm sure not to add too much resin on my surface so that it's not moving too much and that it doesn't drip over. I'll have extra tips for my Patreons on my Patreon page under my consultations tier. If you want to check that out, I'll have it linked in my description. All of your guys' support means a lot to us. So once I have my white pigmented resin mixed in, again I pour it on the surface and use a silicone makeup brush to spread it out across the whole area. Again, I'll be using Let's Resin's alcohol inks, and for my larger surface, I'm going to be starting off with the alcohol ink in the shade Coffee. If you're enjoying this video or find it to be helpful, be sure to leave a thumbs up or a comment down below. It really helps out my channel. Then I take my white alcohol ink and drop it right on top. And this tray we're going to leave like that as is, with only 2 drops of alcohol ink, the coffee and the white. And now I'm moving on to my smaller tray and taking the black alcohol ink. I did really like that blue shade that I used earlier, but instead of just adding a few drops of blue here and there, I'm going to be adding the blue right on top of the black. And then I take my white alcohol ink and drop that on top as well. I leave that to harden and come back the next day. I'm so happy this time that everything stayed in place. On the smaller surface, there was a little bit of movement, and there's more space in between each drop, where on the larger surface, there was a lot less movement. Everything kind of stayed put, and there's not much space between each drop. So I would recommend doing this technique on a larger surface, and working on a surface that has a lifted edge like this tray, and working inside of a mold I think would make the process a little bit easier. It might take a few tries to see what will work best with your type of resin and your type of pigments, but if you want to use what I'm using, again, be sure to check out the links in my description. I'll have all the products there, and if you'd like a few extra tips and pointers, be sure to check out my Patreon page as well. I removed the liquid latex and used a heat gun and an X-Acto knife to get rid of any of the drops that stayed on the back. I initially was thinking about doing a silver trim for this smaller blue tray, but seeing the design with the gold trim that was left from before, I kind of grew on the idea of doing a gold trim and did that instead. And here's the final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on my Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art.